Chris Devonshire-Ellis, thank you very much for being on my show on Syriana Analysis. It's a really honor to have you for the first time on my channel and for you to share your great insights with the audience of Syriana Analysis. You're the founder of Dietz and Shira and Associates and chairman of the firm's International Board of Equity Partners and Directors and the managing director of Asia Briefing Publications. Recently, you published an article titled The New Candidate Countries for BRICS Expansion, and I think it's an educational article for people to know if the candidate countries join the BRICS, what would be the status of the BRICS as an economic bloc and its place in the international community. Now, increasing number of countries are expressing interest in joining the BRICS, as we can see, for example, Algeria, which is considered the 11th largest gas reserves in the world, applied officially, and countries, for example, that used to revolve in the American orbit, such as Saudi Arabia, also showing interest to join the bloc. Why is the economic grouping is so attractive nowadays for developing countries? And most importantly, should the United States be worried by the will or the interest of these countries to join this economic bloc?
Okay, thank you. Well, the BRICS, which as they currently are Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've existed as a predominantly trade grouping for a number of years now. It's not an official bloc. There's no multilateral trade agreements between them. So it's a loose alignment of mainly economic and trade interests. Now, 13 other countries have expressed a desire to join with the BRICS, and as you mentioned, these include Algeria and Saudi Arabia. Now, I think what's really happening is that this emergence of an enlarged BRICS, as and when it happens, is really countries looking to hedge their bets in wake of perceived potential US aggression in matters of trade. I think that the US has perhaps overstepped the mark in its ability to impose tariffs and sanctions, especially without reference to the World Trade Organization. It's unilaterally imposed these. I think that has countries concerned that it could happen to them. The US has also cut countries such as Iran, also interested in the BRICS, by the way, and Russia, of course, a member of the BRICS, off the SWIFT banking network. So I think what this means is that other countries are hedging their bets and feeling that if there is a future potential for dispute with the United States, then they have some sort of sanctuary within an alternative trade organization. And I think that's what this is really all about. It's an alternative to the US and hedging trade and economic bets against any potential future US disputes.
As we can see, the new proposed BRICS members, as you mentioned in your article, they will create an entity with a GDP 30% larger than of the United States, also over 50% of the global population, and after Algeria's and Saudi Arabia's candidacy, they will be in control of 60% of global gas reserves. Are we witnessing the establishment of two parallel international communities with clashing potentials and tendencies, or the sole objective of the BRICS is to pursue the development aspirations of its member states and beyond?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the BRICS really is a trade bloc looking to hedge against potential problems with the United States. The development of the BRICS, if these other 13 countries join, will mean that large amounts of the world's oil and gas energy resources and many other resources, everything from fresh water to rare earths and other minerals, will lie largely within the BRICS grouping. Now, it's a moot point as to how the United States views that. Interestingly, NATO stated earlier this year that it viewed that 75% of the current BRICS membership could be considered a threat. I think that's a little overstating things. The BRICS exists as a trade organization. I think they're fundamentally interested in securing their own trade and supply chain lines and routes. I don't think it's particularly targeted as an anti-American or as an alternative to American supply chains and power throughout the world. So I don't think BRICS fulfills that role. But I do believe that there is an alternative organization, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes many of the BRICS countries and others, which is both a regional Eurasian trade and security alliance. So it's that, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which I feel the US is probably going to be more concerned about, as it specifically contains a security aspect. So let's just examine that a little bit. The SCO has been in existence for nearly for about just over 20 years. It was originally designed to cater for an eventuality where the United States left Afghanistan with the Chinese and Russians wanting to be able to have an organization which could pick up the pieces and deflect a potential destabilization of Central Asia should that happen. And of course, over time, the US have pulled out of Afghanistan, and both China, Russia, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization members have been very active in maintaining peace in that region. There haven't been serious incidents in Afghanistan now for over a year, and as of yet, there hasn't been any spillover from Afghanistan into other countries which are sensitive, such as Pakistan. So it is a security bloc, but more countries are coming into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, not just now from Central Asia, but also from the Middle East. So I think the United States is more likely to view the SCO as a security challenge rather than the BRICS. BRICS is about trade. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is also about trade, but it definitely has a security component to that. So that is where I think potential US concerns would lie, with the SCO rather than the BRICS.
Now, the analysts, I have seen a few analysts online, they argue that one of the factors that the United States is still leading global financial affairs is Washington's ability to keep its decisive influence over the IMF and the World Bank. However, you mentioned in your article the New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. What are the functioning duties of these banks, and how do they finance their budgets?
Well, I think the development of the BRICS Bank, which is now known as the New Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has been as a result of unhappiness with the way in which the World Bank and IMF, which is part of the World Bank, and is heavily influenced by the United States, about how the World Bank and the IMF have tended to attach conditions to lending, and these typically include democratic reforms and other areas of liberalization in countries that, frankly, are not familiar with these structures, these political structures. So there's been some resentment to countries that need to have investment being told that, well, you can have the money, but you also need to have political reforms and you need to do something about human rights. Now, some of these countries, as I said, are very conservative. Their whole human rights creed differs to that of the more liberal West. And I think they resent the fact that they have to change their political structures and even religious structures in order to request loans. So the New Development Bank, which is jointly owned 20% each by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, what they do is they provide intra-BRICS loans, which is one of the reasons why other countries want to join, to be able to have part of that pie. But in terms of the investments which the New Development Bank have been making, interestingly, they've been centered on mainly providing green financial solutions, technological finance, other things, water treatment, soil erosion problems, issues concerning deforestation, and so on and so forth. So the New Development Bank is kind of flying the flag for ecological development and sustainable development within the BRICS countries, and that's a good thing. If you look at their development portfolio, it's online. If you look at the New Development Bank, very heavily green orientated. Now the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is a different animal. China is the largest shareholder in there, interestingly followed by India, and then Russia. And then after that, there's about 80, 90 different members with different values of or different amounts of equity. So there's close to 100 members or equity stakeholders in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Now that has a different agenda. That is primarily about infrastructure investment, as the title of the bank says. So they're investing more in things such as roads and rail, ports, airports, and so on and so forth. So that fits right in with China's Belt and Road Initiative plans. And that's what really the AIIB is doing as opposed to the NDB. Both, however, are AAA rated banks and have capitalized at 100 billion US dollars. So they are significant operations. So the New Development Bank and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank fulfill slightly different roles, with the AIIB involved with, as the name suggests, in infrastructure, so roads, rail, ports, airports, and other projects, and does that on a global basis, while the NDB is more involved in ecological financing. Both of them are significant banks. They both have AAA rating status, and both are capitalized at US $100 billion. But they fulfill different functions. However, neither of them impose philosophical or other issues or political issues in the ability for them to provide loans. They both provide financing for loans based on the merits of the project itself, and do not insist upon any other criteria such as democratic values, human rights values, and these sorts of things. So that's proven popular, especially with the emerging markets. So there is a difference between the approach between the emerging East and the West in terms of how they provide money.
Now, one of the reasons why regional and international powers show interest in the BRICS is the sanctions and the unilateral coercive measures imposed by Western governments against Russia, China, and lots of countries that do not comply with the American foreign policy or the dictates coming from Washington. Will this change in global trade and supply chains through the economic integration of BRICS countries have profound implications on the U.S. Hegemony over the world, in your opinion?
That's difficult to say. There has been a tendency for the United States to perhaps overreach, I think unwisely so, and it has upset the emerging global order. For example, you have the G7. Neither China nor India are members of the G7, which is frankly ridiculous. Neither China or India, just as examples, have particularly a high percentage of votes at the World Bank, which is supposed to deal with world economic problems. Instead, these institutions have tended to be rather more heavily influenced by the United States and project US trade and foreign policy upon the rest of the world. And there is now resistance against that. Now, it remains to be seen how far the United States wishes to go in preserving that. But it seems to me that perhaps the game is up a bit. China, despite Xi Jinping yesterday at the G20 summit, saying that China recognized that it would not challenge the United States, I think that China will be challenging the United States in trade and in its ability to to bring emerging economies together to promote what Xi Jinping says is a fairer world. That's something that I personally subscribe to. I think that the US has been the victim of perhaps overreaching itself, trying to impose too much too soon on other economies, and it's facing pushback against this. Of course, it doesn't like it, but when you look at the United States as part of the world, it's not the only player. And as he pointed out at the beginning of this interview, the collective new BRICS would have a GDP significantly higher than that of the US. So things are changing. I think it's a little bit too early as to how things will pan out. We'll have to see how aggressively the United States wishes to maintain its position as a unilateral player, whereas the desire, the overreaching desire globally, is for a multipolar-led world. So there's potential for problems ahead, but let's see. That's up to the politicians to deal with. I believe, as in trade, as a great provider of peace, if you get people to do business with each other, they're less likely to shoot each other with guns. So I think trade is a big aspect to this, and to that I think the development of the BRICS is a welcome and very interesting alternative in hedging bets against the perceived American hegemony.
Yeah, I know you said that the BRICS doesn't have a military or a security aspect, but in your opinion, do you expect, like in the future at least, for the BRICS to have a joint military and security response to the challenges threatening the bloc or one of its members, or this is going to be solely to the CSTO, for example, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
I think that the BRICS is not going to come as an organization, security or military focused. It is a trade organization. That doesn't mean to say that its members don't have military and security concerns, because of course they do. But the function of the BRICS is to develop trade and intra-BRICS trade. BRICS doesn't need to get involved with regional security or military problems because the Shanghai Organization exists, and it's its role, amongst others, to deal with regional security. So I don't see the BRICS as getting involved as a security or developing to be a security threat. But the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is a different animal. It too is involved in trade and commerce, and there has been talk of some sort of trade agreements being put together between the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Eurasian Economic Union, for example. But the SCO does have a security aspect to that, principally to maintain the peace in and around Afghanistan. But that could develop to incorporate other issues if SCO members feel that they are under threat from NATO, the United States, or other potentially future difficult blocs, including religious extremism, of course, which has always been a core remit of the SCO's security aspect. So the SCO, I think, very much a security play. It is also, I should add, in the interest of the United States to talk up security issues. They are one of the world's largest suppliers of weapons, as are many other members of NATO, France, the United Kingdom, big weapons manufacturers. So it's in their interest to talk up the potential of conflict in order to give their own weapons manufacturers and military capabilities a boost. People are buying into this. Taiwan, for example, has bought a lot of equipment from the United States over the last couple of years on the remit that China might invade. I think the general consensus is that's unlikely to happen, but that doesn't mean that Taiwan hasn't acquired those weapons, because it has. So I think the United States has some vested trade interests in playing up the military potential for conflict within the SCO. And that's something which needs to be taken seriously. Personally, I think it's unnecessary, but, it's a capitalist society and they will sell whatever they can.
Chris Devonshire-Ellis, it was a really pleasure to talk to you on Syriana Analysis and listen to your insights. I myself learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience of Syriana Analysis appreciate your input. Guys, I will put the profile of Chris in the description for you to follow his work. It would be nice to give him a follow so that we also understand a different perspective regarding BRICS that I already covered it from a technical point of view, and he's giving us a very good analytical point of view. It's worth following him. Thank you very much, Chris, for being my guest.
You're very welcome. Thank you.